Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is Yuglo Fashion and thank you so much for stopping by. In our tutorial class today, I'll be sharing the making of this drape gown with kimono sleeves. So please stay tuned and enjoy the tutorial. I used vintage fabric of 2 yards for this style. So I folded it into 2 at first. You can see the folding, and then I later folded it into 4. That's because I'll be cutting both the front and the back together. Next, I proceed to mark from the midpoint of my neckline to my desired sleeve length, which is 18 inches. I already said I have 2 yards of fabric on the table, so definitely it's 18 inches. And after that, I proceed to mark the neck width, which is 3.5 inches on my left hand side, and on the right hand side I marked 1.5 inch downward and I connected it back to the neck width of 3.5 inches. You can see I have 4 foldings here already. This was why I said I have 2 openings, and on my right side I have 4 joint parts. So next I proceed to mark the sleeve, and I use 10 inches for this, and I proceed to cut out the shoulder slope, and I placed my tape back to the neckline and measure 28 inches. That's where I'll determine the drape. Though it's not compulsory that you cut your shoulder slope before measuring the 28 inches. In order not to get confused, you may not cut it out yet. After measuring the 28 inches, then you can proceed to cut it out. And at the hem here, I measure 4 inches inward. Right from my right hand side, I measure it inward and I proceed to connect it to the 28 inches. After connecting it back to the 28 inches, I realized that the hem wouldn't be as pencil or as shapy as I wanted the gown to be. So I had to readjust the hem. So after connecting, I placed back my tape at the hem, although I've cut it out before I realized. So after cutting it, I placed my tape back at the hem and I proceed to mark additional 2 inches at the hem. So I mark the 2 inches and connect the 2 inches all the way back to the 28 inches again, and I also cut it out. So this will help the shape of the hem. So if you are cutting yours, you can do like 7 inches, you can do 6 inches. It depends on your preference. It depends on the shape, how tiny, how slim you want the hem to be. Then after cutting it out, I placed back my tape at the sleeve side and I measure ½ inch inward. You can do 1 inch here. It will help you to be able to fold the sleeve very well. So I marked ½ inch inward and I connected it all the way down to the 28 inches again. So this is what we have after cutting everything out. Next, I proceed to the neckline. You know, I have my front and back on each other, so I mark the back neck length first. You know, I've marked the width to be 3.5, so the length I used 1 inch because I still have both front and back on each other like I mentioned earlier. So I used 1 inch for the length and I proceed to cut it out. Later I separated the front and back from each other. So the next thing to do now is to cut the neck length, the length of the neckline of the front. So I folded it equally again on each other this way. You remember the back is separate now, so this is the front on the table. So and I placed my tape at the neckline and I measured the length. So I used 7 inches for the length of the front neckline. You remember the back is 1 while the front now is 7 inches. You can use your desired length. And after marking the 7 inches, the shape of the front is slant, so I proceed to use my free hand. I actually use free hand. You can see I did not sketch out anything here and I did not use pattern because it's a maxi wear or it's all this rich auntie style. So most times you can use your free hand to do this. So at the hem of the front, on my left hand side, I marked 5 inch upward. That's because of the shape that we have there. If you look closely at the thumbnail, there's a shape at the hem. So in order to achieve this, I came up with 5 inches and I proceed to connect it to the right hand side and cut it out. Next, I opened it up and I cut facing. So I folded the lining on each other. I did not use my remaining fabric, although there's no remaining fabric anyways, so I used lining for the facing. You can use your fabric if it's still remaining. So I folded it into two and I placed first the back neckline on it. I just did this for the sake of the beginners that may be confused on how to cut facing. So I cut, this is how to go about it. I cut the facing few inches after the neckline, and the same thing I did to the front also. Placed it on the lining and I cut it out, and I placed both the front and the back facing on each other and ensured that their edges are lined, that is the side aligned. After cutting it out, I proceed to add interface to it. So this is it. After adding interface, I've placed the main fabric on the table. This is the back. I'll be doing the back first, and I placed the facing on the neckline and pinned it down and proceed to the machine to sew. So this is also the front. I placed the facing on the front also, and I proceed to the machine to sew as well. So I have the front and the back bodies on the table. Next is to stitch the shoulder and the sleeve together. But before that, you can see that the hem of the facing is on fold. I ironed ½ inch of the facing, the hem of the facing on fold. Next, I proceed to pin the shoulder down to the sleeve side. I pinned it, and also I pinned the facing together as well, and I proceed to the machine to stitch. So after stitching the ½ inch, I ironed or fold, I stitch it round. Though the stitch is not going to be obvious since it's the black fabric, you can actually use your hemming gum as well if you don't want your stitches to show. Next, I placed back my tape on the shoulder and I measured 17 inches downward. So this is where the drawstring will be fixed, and I've already cut the pieces. So this will be the casing for the drawstring. So I have 2.5 inches for the width, and the length I have 13 inches actually here, and the 13 inches has ½ inch seam allowance up and ½ inch seam allowance down, so which means it is 12 inches in total plus 1 inch allowance. Then I proceed to pin it ½ inch to the midpoint of the neckline and stitch. So after stitching it first, I placed it again on fold. Remember, I added ½ inch allowance to the hem, so I stitched the ½ inch allowance, and after stitching the ½ inch allowance, I proceed to fold it to the other side this way. You can actually iron ½ inch at the other edge here, so you won't be dragging with it while stitching it. So I folded the ½ inch at the edge here and I pinned it and proceed to the machine to stitch. So after stitching, this is what it looks like. Next is to divide the casing. You know, the strings are two, so we need to divide the casing into two. So I proceed to mark the middle of the casing, and next I proceed to the machine to stitch the middle. Now this is our drawstring. You can just cut your desired length, but remember it's going to have tassel at the end, so it should not be too long. So after stitching the string, I proceed to fix it inside the casing. At the hem, I lock the casing and the strings together so that it doesn't fall off after pulling. While pulling, it doesn't fall off. Next, I proceed to the sleeve side and I folded it on each other this way. You remember I left like ½ inch there. This was why I said you can use 1 inch, so it will be easy. The allowance you will have here, you'll be able to fold it big. So this is it. After folding, you can see it neatly done. Next, I proceed to the sides and I stitch both the front and the back sides together this way. I first pinned the two together, then proceed to the machine to stitch. So after stitching the sides also, I proceed to the hem and I stitch the hem all around. So this is what we have at the end of the day. So thank you very much for watching this tutorial to the end. See you in my next video. Bye.